This episode of the What the FinTech podcast is sponsored by the Georgia Fintech Academy.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of What the FinTech, a podcast from the team at FinTech Futures and Banking Technology magazine. My name is Heather Sugg, U.S. correspondent for FinTech Futures, and I am joined here today by Laura Gibson-Lamothe, Executive Director at the Georgia Fintech Academy. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Very happy to have you. And we go back a long ways. You're a great FinTech friend. And let's start with introductions and talk a little bit about yourself. And what many people might not know about you is the history that you have in both banking and FinTech.
Yeah. So thinking about how I started off embarking my career in FinTech and in payments, I say I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the banking capital here in the U.S., working for a number of banks and financial institutions, starting off with some back office focus to user experience and digital type of transformation work and initiatives. Supported a lot of the M&A events that happened kind of in the early 2000s. And I'd say it gave me a good taste of just the variety of opportunities there are in this industry, supporting operations, supporting technology, kind of navigating my career into leadership and really broadening my perspective on really where there are opportunities for people like myself who studied in college fine arts and thought about pursuing a totally different career journey, a career pathway, found myself wanting to make an income for myself and not be a starving artist, and took advantage of an internship opportunity in project management, which really was the gateway for me into the financial services industry. And so just having that type of background and kind of looking at where I am now, reflecting on the fact that I'm helping other students at that pivotal point in my career navigate their own career journeys is just fascinating. So as you mentioned, like with the FinTech Academy and kind of just going through what we do and the services that we offer within the university system of Georgia, which is one of the larger university systems in the entire U.S., 26 colleges and universities, Georgia Tech to Georgia State and other that are household names, at least from a college football perspective. I know from an academic perspective, they're known for academic research, and they've been doing a lot of focus on evolving as academic institutions are. And we've seen a growing interest in FinTech. And to be able to say this year, celebrating 5 years for the FinTech Academy, we've reached over 10,000 students, and we've helped place almost 50% of them that we can actually track into FinTech roles is a really encouraging metric for us. And it continues to show the demand and interest in FinTech, but then also the success in where we're seeing actual valuable placement in the industry as well.
It's nice to see that the students are interested in this and that they know it's a growing and exciting field now. FinTech is so much more than what it used to be. What are some good ways that FinTechs have been working and partnering with you? It's easy to say, let's get involved with what you're doing, but tell us what some use cases look like and where you've seen success.
I think it's now been really fascinating to see the investment that we're seeing from the industry. So thinking about how curriculum is developed and really integrating, I think, where there are certain skill sets and competencies required and making sure that we have incorporated that feedback and that insight into how we're developing the training and the curriculum. A lot of our students are prepared to enter the industry based on that insight and that knowledge. So for us, working with companies like FIS and Visa and US Bank, our top tier sponsors for the Academy, we've been nurturing this curriculum over the past 5 years. It's evolved from data science and cybersecurity to now we're focused on project management and risk and compliance as well. And so the vertical functions that we're continuing to support grow and expand, but it is very closely in sync as much as possible, given the amount of due diligence and of requirements that are needed for curriculum accreditation. We still have that process, that very robust process, but keeping that in mind, we're constantly refreshing and looking for input from the industry on where we can evolve that curriculum set. But then also complementary is the programming. So outside of just the curriculum and what they learn as far as lectures and in the classroom, we have experiential learning opportunities. So we're constantly looking for innovative ways to really not only provide different access points for students to learn, but then to demonstrate what they've learned. I think that's a huge differentiator, is to be able to give a student not only a challenge, but to be able to see them shine and demonstrate the skills that they just learned firsthand and in front of an audience of industry, so they can actually get that perspective and that feedback real time. And I think that's really where students are able to kind of see the benefits of that process, because it is a journey that they're going through. And to be able to say they've done this presentation in front of an executive leadership team, that took me 20 years in the industry to get that type of visibility and that type of feedback and input. So it's an incredible pattern of kind of integrating the academic and the industry together to really make sure that we have created that successful opportunity for students to thrive.
You're really breaking down some of the barriers that have always been associated with that entry-level employee and the onboarding process. So if someone comes prepared with some of the basic things that we used to spend a year teaching, they're ready to move to next levels very quickly. And what roles and responsibilities, or what titles and what people from fintechs have you seen getting involved, and what behooves the fintech most there?
Yeah, at first I thought, let me just go and target the people management. So any folks that are focused on talent acquisition, HR type functions, but we continue to see interest span across different verticals within an organization. Now it's been focused on strategy and how do we align what we're not only teaching, but giving students exposure and access to from a functional perspective. Obviously, I mentioned earlier kind of like the verticals of cybersecurity and data science and other kind of functional areas. From the leadership perspective in the industry, focusing on the CTO that has line in sight in some of the change management aspects. What's on the horizon? How are they innovating? What are the things that they're looking for 5, 10 plus years out? Because that's what we need to strategize and plan for, is what is that next level of expectation for the future of talent. And so that's where we are now. I mean, we've been talking about AI, which is so funny because obviously you can't go anywhere without hearing something related to AI. But 5 years ago, when the FinTech Academy was originally derived, it was based on AI, machine learning, and the fraud risk management space. And that is really the perfect blend between finance and technology. And to see a lot of the students that we would kind of have come through that particular pipeline from an education perspective were the perfect marriage of finance and technology. Some of them were pure finance students and some are business technology students. And being able to give that exposure and to connect the dots to the fact that this particular degree or this particular concentration really is relevant in a specific industry. And I think that kind of unlocks, you know what I mean? It's more than just like pursuing a degree in cybersecurity. We're now saying, hey, pursue this particular field because you have the experiential learning and some of the other pieces that also complement and make you stronger and more competitive, I think, in the industry.
That's, I think, important because we're reading in a lot of the mainstream media how the job market is hard for entry-level students coming into the job market. And a lot of people might be blaming that on AI or other things that are advancing. But from your perspective, they can be more advanced in AI capabilities than people in the workforce today. So how do you see that juxtaposition with some stories we're reading and what's happening in your real world?
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. I mean, thinking about the population that we serve, I mean, majority of them are younger, they're digitally native. They are not unfamiliar with some of these technologies and are using it just in their spare time, or they're engaging with, we were talking earlier about social media influencers and other ways that they're consuming kind of media. And so they're really challenged with what can they not do. These students are blank slates. When I came into the industry, I was definitely constrained, I'd like to say. I probably shouldn't for any of the risk and compliance folks listening in, but I was joking around with some of my colleagues the other day just about my journey and thinking about as a project manager, as a early days innovator, you would wait downstream to hear from legal risk and compliance that you can't do this. And these students are willing to kind of push the needle in regards to innovation. They're thinking of really creative, innovative ways to reach certain populations or achieve certain things and optimize and create efficiencies. And I think that's something that is just where I think industry, companies, organizations, to create a balance, have to have a culture of openness, a conversation. Obviously, there's constructive criticism that can be issued there, but I think having that perfect blend of bringing this younger generation into the fold and kind of being receptive of hearing some of the ideas and some of the concepts but then balancing it with obviously the feasibility and the reality of what's required in this industry is the perfect complementary kind of pattern. We had a hackathon, 300 students this past weekend across the university system, hosted at Kennesaw State University. It was an incredible moment for me to see the diverse community that we had in the room. But these students only had 24 hours. They were given a few resources and a little bit of training. They all had some interest in fintech. Some have taken courses. Some were masters in fintech specialists. Some were finance and just had heard for the first time about fintech. But they were given challenges around AI, around stablecoin, around financial inclusion. And these core themes were things that they were kind of just given the runway to innovate and ideate. And what they presented were compelling solutions, like actual prototypes and demos. They didn't just present a few slides saying this is what they would like to develop. They developed it. And I saw just incredible instances of just understanding about how money moves. And not only the understanding of how money moves, but like what does the user experience really require for different demographics, different languages, people who might have other barriers from a financial access perspective. And so the way that they were presenting with such maturity and then also presenting an actual real live functional demo was just amazing to see.
That is special because we were talking earlier too about the generational transfer of wealth, and it's this generation that's going to know what their true needs are. As we always preach that fintechs need to build something that meets a need, not just build something that's cool. They're identifying this early and already proving true solve points for it too.
Yeah. And I think they're challenging the status quo. So just because things have operated that way, they're asking why. And they're challenging the fact that there are some opportunities that may not have been considered. And maybe 10 years ago, it made sense that we didn't necessarily develop things a certain way. And now they're also being able to provide that insight as far as the research and some of the data points that are really required behind the scenes to kind of justify, analyze, and then be able to develop a path and identify a path forward for solutioning.
That is special. So you already spoke a little bit about what is so important with the many universities that you have access to in Georgia and what you're doing and why the Georgia Fintech Academy has so many great resources. But tell me a little bit about, with Atlanta and the Georgia area being Transaction Alley, what are the resources you're able to pull into and how is it that you reach even beyond a state?
Yeah, just in case any of our audience aren't familiar with the term Transaction Alley, love going out to these shows like we were at Money20 now, and I often have that same conversation around the fact that we're so rooted in fintech and in payments in the Atlanta ecosystem. 70%, I believe, this is a data point that's probably 5 years old now, but 70% of all U.S.-based transactions are routed through the state of Georgia. And given that we're kind of co-located with all of these payments companies, these financial institutions, and then right outside their backyard are all these universities known for their academic research and excellence and helping cultivate talent, bringing those two pieces together has just been amazing to kind of see that pattern and that footprint. From a fintech perspective, over 260 fintechs are also operating in the state of Georgia. And those fintechs are, I think, broadening the perspective on how we truly integrate and bridge the gap between industry and academia. So when I mentioned earlier about the industry's influence on curriculum, we're now talking about other examples where we're working with fintechs in their QA, providing student talent to participate in that exercise as an extension of their internal small operations, depending on the size and scale of the fintech. We also have students that are being presented challenges and leveraging those challenges, those problem statements to help solve problems for companies of various sizes. So there's a lot of benefit. It's almost a mutual benefit to be able to say that we can almost consult with fintechs and help maybe advise or provide access to resources while in exchange we're giving students experience. And that's a pattern I think that is extremely valuable. And I don't know necessarily any other market that's doing it like that. So really taking advantage of the fact that we have the human capital, the brilliance and the energy and the excitement through the student population. And then on the other side, we have all of these innovators that are bringing really innovative, cutting edge solutions in the fintech capacity right here in Georgia. And so it's been really great to kind of see that take place and be able to really amplify the opportunity, because part of it's having these conversations to let people know the awareness that this exists, and these exercises can be almost instantly repeated and replicated across our university system and our institutions. But then also being able to really influence, I think, creating those opportunities and working side by side with these fintechs and with these universities to make it happen.
So since you're 5 years into this, what are some lessons learned that you would advise for other fintech academies that might want to start?
I think making sure that you have a established pattern of connectivity within the industry. Obviously, coming out to industry events like this, hearing about what's hot and what's not, what is succeeding in the industry and maybe what isn't, what's working for a lot of companies and what isn't. I think taking that insight and informing what you're developing as a program is extremely critical, but then also the network. And we always say the network is the most valuable thing that you can have. For me, the network isn't necessarily just for the exposure, the access, and promoting what we do. It's also finding jobs for students and then creatively finding opportunities, like I mentioned, for experience and et cetera. So I think it's a lot of different things that can happen, but making sure that you have that network, making sure you have that plug-in from industry and that connectivity, and then also making sure that you're being mindful that I think culturally there's a difference in the speed of the industry than there is in academia. Realistically, we can't update and modify curriculum every single week, every month, every year, even in some cases. But what we do is complement that with our programming. We have speakers come and speak with our students on a variety of different types of topics across the industry or representing different functional areas, so they get to see firsthand how people are doing what they learn in the classroom in the industry. And that's just as valuable as curriculum. I think the whole package altogether is really required to make it successful.
Absolutely. Between educating the students to what's available in fintech and making sure they have those connections, you're opening up the world, you're opening up the fintech world to talent that they might not have had access to otherwise, and vice versa for the students to enter a world of fintech that it might not have been available to them.
Yeah, that's so true. I think when I look around this conference and others, you could definitely see I like to say the population is aging. I myself am aging. I've been in the industry for 20 years and I'm like, man, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And we work really hard to even provide students exposure to this type of arena so they can see this firsthand and learn and network themselves. But getting students access to this industry is much more than just finding them a job. This is something that's really opening doors for financial wellness and success for our students. A lot of them are first generation working and navigating corporate life. And for us to be able to achieve, I think, helping usher a student into the industry is much more than just the number, the metrics that I mentioned earlier.
I'm looking forward to when you have alumni that have reached the upper echelons of things and get to go work in this. That'll be a special moment. Let me close with asking one final question. I want your predictions. Give me something big and bold. What do you see coming in the future for fintech talent?
Yeah, I said earlier just around the importance and the value of fintech talent. I think it is going to be must-have for every industry partner to consider how are they influencing the development of talent versus just recruiting talent at the end of the pipeline. I think going back to my early days in this industry, it was a luxury to be able to say, I just want to pick from the cream of the crop. Now companies are starting much earlier. We also work through the Department of Education. I didn't mention this. So at the high school level, students taking under our dual enrollment program, fintech classes, and it starts there and even earlier. And so companies are starting to build those relationships really early. They're starting to influence, and through education, through extracurricular opportunities, through hackathons, having that brand awareness and building that pattern so they can recruit further downstream post-graduation. I think that's where the industry is shifting. In order to really have and cultivate that culture and that community of top talent, you have to go out and influence it versus just picking from the top of the list.
Mm-hmm. Going out and making your impact and making your case. I love it. Laura, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for making the time for this and for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's a pleasure.
Hope to see you again next time soon.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. A big thank you to our host for this week, Heather Sugg, our guest, Laura Gibson-Lamothe, and of course, the Georgia Fintech Academy for sponsoring this episode. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to keep up with the latest fintech news. If you like this podcast and our other episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcasting service to get notified about future episodes. Thanks as well to Arama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at arama.tv. As always, thank you very much for your support, and we'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech. But until then, goodbye.